This video is clickbait. Okay, it's not come back. It's not clickbait. But let me just give the disclaimer up front. You may or may not like what I have to say in this video, but it needs to be said. It needs to be said. Now, the funny thing is, I don't even know entirely what I'm going to say. You guys can be upset. You can even hit the dislike on this video. You can be mad. But that is the reality of it. I watched the whole video already, so this isn't going to be like a first time viewing reaction or anything like that. But given the fact that I myself am an author, and given the fact that I write fantasy, and given the fact that in the past I've brought up a lot of the same topics and issues that were brought up in this video.
Wanting to weigh in on this whole Black Siri thing. I don't know what the fuck's going on with that. It's ridiculous.
If it's about medieval Europe, then explain the sci-fi genre to me. Explain why the fuck motherfuckers in space 2, 3, 400, 5,000 years in the future still don't have multiculturalism. Maybe we have to start off with some indie films that, you know, ain't getting watched. Maybe that's how black people have to begin, but that's how you fucking begin. I do not understand why people argue so strongly for racial diversity in certain things, but then when there are people who exist or who provide those things, rather than support them, it's like you want to run to the companies that you supposedly abhor because they don't have diversity and then beg them to do it. I don't get that. I don't think there's a ton of people who come from my background or who have my particular self-interest, yada, 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 who would actually do a reaction to this video. So for anyone curious, this is my fantasy book in the background, or the first book, as it says, book 1 of the Fate Slayer saga. I actually have the copy of it right here. Damn, is it not going to let me put my book in my... Sorry, I'm still learning how to do this kind of stuff. But yeah, you can see it. The light's kind of shining on it. Oh, it kind of looks kind of... Yeah. This is book 1. And it's so crazy because just yesterday, I released a video where I was talking about just finishing the first draft of my second book, which is the sequel to this. It took me 5 years to do. And I see this video. Like, I literally uploaded that video yesterday and installed this, and I was like, I have got to say something. 100%. The video is a decent length already, and with my commentary on top of it, because I will be pausing and stopping and starting. This isn't the type of video where we're just going to do a sit through and I'm just going to sit there looking at the camera like this. You know, like you see these reaction videos that people are making, and I'm just like, well, what is this? Is this content? Is this what we're doing now? Like, anyway, let me not even get into all that. But no, this is going to be an actual reaction video, okay? So it's going to be longer than the original. If you want to see the original, the link will be in the description, okay? You can go check it out. I'll also put it in the pinned comment. If I feel like I need to cook, we're going to cook. If I feel like I need to shut up, I'm going to shut up. And that's what we're going to do. So I'm going to put my AirPods in, okay? And yeah. Oh, it's already in 1.5? Interesting. I didn't know that. Yeah, we can maybe leave it in 1.5. YouTube Premium is crazy. You got 4 times. Like, who listens to a video on 4 times speed? Insane. Like, you literally can't even understand anything. But hey, it's good to have the options, right? Let's get into it.
I've been meaning to talk about this for a while now, and it's a topic some have already discussed in a way, but I wanted to throw my 2 cents into the ring. What I am referring to is black people in fiction, whether it's sci-fi, high fantasy, or in between. One thing that I've noticed, and that many have also noticed, is that people have a strong reaction to seeing black people in specific settings. What I mean is, to some people, they need a justifiable reason for why black people exist in these fictional worlds. They can never just be. Now, I am not talking about blackwashing in this case, as that's another discussion to be had. I am more referring to seeing originally black characters in fictional worlds, and still having issues with it. Black people have always...
Right, it's good. So first of all, it's good that he makes a distinction between the blackwashing, the race swapping, and original black characters. It's good that you make that distinction because I already have a video on my channel talking about the race swapping thing, and I am not for it like 99% of the time. I talk about it in detail in that video, so if you're interested, you can check that video out. But by and large, I'm not with it, okay? I made a video about The Little Mermaid and Ariel and how I felt about that years before most people even knew that was happening. So yeah, I've never been a fan of it. I'm never going to be a fan of it. And yeah, you can check out my video on why that is.
fit in fiction, and there have been many pioneers pushing for it for a while now, but that hasn't changed people's reaction. The reason why I'm talking about this is that recently, well, it was a week ago or something, there was a massive discussion within the Warhammer community about the inclusion of a black character in a specific faction. Let me give you the rundown. There was a discussion about the Warhammer series in which a marine unit called the Space Wolves features black people. For the record, this whole discourse stemmed from an upcoming DLC, and some people felt like this specific faction shouldn't have any black people in it due to it being inspired by Scandinavian Viking culture. Keep in mind, we're talking about a universe set 40,000 years in the future, where the Earth as we know it no longer exists, and humanity has colonized millions of planets. The lore in this universe is literally crazy and rich, with shit happening that is beyond comprehension, and yet a black guy, or for argument's sake, a dark-skinned Fenrisian, is hard for them to accept. During this whole ordeal, I observed all manner of explanations given for why such a character couldn't be in this faction, from the planet being too cold for dark-skinned characters to the recent addition of black characters just being DEI. This isn't the first time.
Right, now I will say this. I have definitely commented on this before to do with the fact that there are people who have an issue with black people being in certain parts of science fiction and fantasy, especially when it comes down to sci-fi, which has always been a bit bizarre, right? And I've mentioned that before, like, why is that an issue? Now, we have to be very clear about this. There are people who are taking issue with it when it comes to this specific thing with Warhammer. I don't know much about Warhammer, so I can't comment on whether that's justified or not. I have no idea. But what I will say is that outside of Warhammer, people have done it as well. So it's not just a Warhammer thing. So to be fair to his argument, even if people can make a justification for it in this particular instance, I guess, again, as a non-Warhammer fan, what I would be asking is, are there other black characters within Warhammer, and do people have a similar reaction to them? Because that's really the main way to tell with these things. And this is one of the issues that I'm going to point out immediately that I kind of have with the premise of this video. He originally said, like he said already in a video, that whenever black people are put into fiction, they can't just exist, right? But if that's the case, then for your argument, for that statement to be correct, that has to mean that there are no black characters within popular fiction that non-black people, particularly white people, like. Is that an accurate statement? No. We know that it's not for an absolute fact, because characters like Blade exist, characters like Storm exist. Okay, I know I'm using Marvel characters, but, you know, we can bring up Star Wars. Mace Windu exists. Finn exists. And I know that when Finn was first revealed as a stormtrooper, there was some discussion about that and yada, yada, yada. But now, like, if you look at it today, a lot of people actually think that Finn was a good character and that he got shafted in the sequels. And this is a lot of non-black people saying this. So for your statement to hold complete accuracy, it would have to mean that black people are never given any type of grace, or they're never appreciated, you know, at any instance. And I'm going to be honest with you, DEI is a thing. This isn't, you know, made up. It's not some mythical idea. It is real. It is something that is a literal political agenda, and it is something that is used in ways like this. And, you know, you do have a lot of companies that come out and say that they want to include more people, they want to be more inclusive, they want to have more diversity. They explicitly say this. I've made videos in the past where I've explicitly mentioned that back in, like, the late 2010s, you know, this is 2017, 2018, you had literary agents that were pushing for more diverse books, right, and stuff like that. So there has been a proactive push for diversity, and that push led to a sort of counter push against it. Okay, so I think that's worth bearing in mind. But you're not incorrect in the sense that there are definitely people who, as soon as they see a black person, without any context, their immediate response is woke. You can go and look at any video game, you know, showcase, wherever there's brand new trailers coming out. The moment they see a black character, especially a black woman, they're going to say woke. But I have to be fair, they also do it when they see white women as well. Okay, they also do it when they see an Asian woman. That new game that's coming out from Naughty Dog, I can't remember the name of it right now, but that game got a shit ton of hate. And that's not a black character, that's an Asian female character, and they were hating the fuck out of that game. So, I mean, it's not only black people that this is happening to. It's just one of those things where, really, if it's not a white guy, then there's a good chance they're going to say it's DEI, right? And if he's not straight, I guess. So it's more to do with going against the white straight male archetype as opposed to explicitly just being against black people. But I do get where you're coming from.
time it has happened. So why is it that people get all up and tight when they see black people in fantasy, sci-fi, or anything else? The truth is, just like the Warhammer series, a lot of people, when they think of fiction, they think of European fiction, or to be more precise, white fiction. And that goes for literally most fictional genres created in the West. Every fantastical world is set in either the European Middle Ages or a futuristic version of a Western country or city, which creates a mindset among some of these people that black people shouldn't be in these worlds. And even if the world is set in space, people still cannot fathom why black people are there and get mad when they see too many of them on different planets. I'll get back to this point later. Now you might say to yourself, hold up, these fantasy worlds have orcs, dragons, and magic, but the idea of black people being in the world is immersion breaking. It sounds crazy when you think of it that way, but to understand why some white people have that reaction, you need to see it from their eyes. A lot of white people in this case see these fantasy worlds as their playrealm, a reality created just for them to explore and be the hero. As much as it may be tough for some non-whites to accept, the perfect fantasy world for most white people is a world devoid of non-whites. Or at least if there have to be other non-whites in their world, they need to be sidelined, very small in number, or seen as the exotic foreigners only there to further their narrative. This includes having a city or a kingdom that is predominantly of just their white people. It's kind of a reflection of how they are in real life and their desires. The same is true for East Asians too. When they tell their fantasy stories, it's predominantly East Asians because their fictional world is a playground for them. Speaking of East Asians, you can see something similar with anime. Whenever a dark-skinned character shows up in the story, if they have a prominent role or if they're cool enough and black people begin seeing themselves in that character, there's always this aggressive push to tell black people that these characters are not black like them. If you pay attention here, the issue isn't that the anime character is dark-skinned, it's that they don't want that dark-skinned character, which is already ambiguous to be perceived as African black. It's ironic, they will tell you that all characters in anime are Asian, but have no issue seeing themselves in those anime characters, with many white people believing that these anime characters are actually white. And I can see why, even in anime, more fantasy settings are in Europe or are inspired by Europeans, so that overlap exists. Going back to what I said, they have...
Well, I will say this. I've always had a bit of an issue with Japanese people trying to claim that anime characters are not white characters, because a lot of times when a character in the context of the anime is a white character, what really distinguishes them from the supposedly non-white anime characters? Right? Like if your claim is going to be, well, the anime characters are not white, they're Japanese. I mean, let's be clear about this. Even the fact that you depict them the way you do when they don't look ethnically Japanese is already a bit, you know? But we already know about Asia and its obsession with whiteness. I've literally been to Asia. I mean, my profile picture on my YouTube channel is literally me in Osaka, in front of Osaka Castle. So quite clearly, I'm not speaking as someone who's not been anywhere, okay? So as much as I love Japan and I do love a lot of things about Japanese culture, that is something that is just the reality, is that, you know, a lot of Asian cultures do have a preference towards white skin. This isn't something I made up. You can go to places in Southeast Asia and you will see the advertisements predominantly feature whiter skinned Asian people. Same with their media on television. You see the same thing in South America. But even, you know, in some African countries, you know, you've got people who want to try and bleach their skin and whiten themselves in. So it's an issue that just exists across the world. And it does, I believe, play into, whether consciously or subconsciously, how a lot of people interpret a lot of these fictional worlds and who should be at the forefront of them and who should be represented in them predominantly. But with that being said, though, the question that you as black people need to ask yourself is, why is that? Okay? Now, the answer a lot of you are going to say is white supremacy and such on and so forth. I'm not necessarily going to disagree with you, but the question is, to do with his point when he said that, well, when white people make these worlds, they predominantly want to see themselves in it. I remember I did a video reacting to something that George R. R. Martin said, where George R. R. Martin was basically talking about why a lot of fantasy settings are predominantly white. And he said, well, because a lot of the genre is written by white old men, at least back in the day, right? So he said a lot of the foundations of the genre, basically, let's just say white men, because that is the foundations of the fantasy genre as we know it. You know, with Lord of the Rings, even if you want to talk about Dune being a sort of space fantasy, whatever, he was saying that a lot of the speculative fiction genre, sci-fi and fantasy, it's written by white men. So it's going to reflect the views and the perspectives of white men predominantly, especially from that time. Okay, especially from these older decades where they most certainly were not thinking about no DEI. They most certainly did hold a lot more exclusionary views, and they were a bit more racist, and there was a lot more of that. And some people were just straight up racist, and some people have been documented and we know just had really, you know, strong views against non-white people. But even with that being the case, the genre has evolved and moved to a point where today, you as a non-white person, you can still make your own fiction, you can still push it out there, And there's nothing that's going to stop you from doing this. Okay, now he's going to get later into the video about one of the issues that comes with this that I think we need to seriously examine. But in regards to today, your contention and the contention that a lot of people who've watched your video have is that you're basically saying, well, you know, the problem is that if we do make these characters, if we do make these worlds, you know, white people are going to reject it because they're racist and they just don't want to see black people. And like I said, for that statement to be 100% accurate, then you have to kind of explain to me why there have been black people who have had their stories and have been celebrated, including Black Panther, by the way. Okay? Because I said Blade, but you have Black Panther. You know, Storm was one of the original X-Men, and she's always been extremely popular, right? There's other black characters as well that they can have the story. Like I said, even with Star Wars is one of the biggest franchises in the world. And a lot of white people who are Star Wars fans, they outright say that Disney fumbled by not making him be the main face of that trilogy. He's black. Unambiguously. He's not mixed race. He's a straight up black dude. And a lot of the fans have been saying that he should have been the face of the trilogy. I don't know. I do think that there is definitely anti-blackness in this world. Like I said, I've seen it in many countries around the world. But I think we have to, again, add some context as to what exactly that means when it comes to creating fiction. Because I don't think it's quite as black and white as you're making it out to be.
An issue with black people in fiction. Even ambiguous dark-skinned characters cannot be perceived as African black. They can be anything else as long as they're not black. An aspect of this is that a lot of anime characters are designed to be handsome and cute looking, so in their heads, they don't believe that black Africans can be cute, attractive. So when they see an attractive dark-skinned character, they're not black. A dark-skinned anime character can only be black if they look and act a certain way, which is the stereotypical way. The way they
I mean, I don't...
And even when a fantasy world...
I'm going to be honest, I'd have to see where you got those perspectives from. I've watched one of your some of your other videos, and I see that you spent a lot of time on Twitter or X. And I'm just going to say that's where your first mistake is. You know, like, bro, that platform has been cooked. That's what it's pretty much known for, is being cooked. So you're going to get a lot of unhinged takes on that platform. You know what I mean? It's like the equivalent of Modern Warfare 2 lobbies back in the day. As someone who's a big anime fan, that is the first time I've ever heard someone say that. But maybe it's because I'm not on Twitter. Maybe that's the reason why.
Explicitly is inspired by African culture, like Guild Wars Alona, League of Legends Shurima, or Elder Rings Redguard, people still try their hardest to separate it from black people, attributing certain traits away from Africa to other regions that are more convenient to them or easier to accept. Trust me, I've seen the Reddit discussion and videos made by some people. Many people are just uncomfortable with black people in their fiction. They don't even like the idea of seeing cultures and architectures being inspired by Africa, unless Africans are depicted in a certain way, which now leads me to a certain point. The reason why certain people don't like see Africans black people in fiction is because these fictional black characters are a stark contrast to how they perceive black people in real life. Which is why, when Europeans or Asians decide to add Africans in their stories without caring for being accurate or respectful, we see how they perceive us through their media. Sure, a lot of their depiction of us can range from pure ignorance to absolute racism, but it's an insight into how they believe black people should be in fiction, in their world. We see how they see us, and why, when a black person strays away from those stereotypical depictions they envision in their heads, it bothers them a lot. Let's go back to the space example I mentioned before. The reason why some people don't like to see...
Now, I completely agree with that. And I think that is actually a lot more the heart of the matter than maybe a lot of people realize. It's my personal belief, and it has been for a minute, that a large part of the reason why you'll see pushback, why when Black Panther was first coming out, you know, and to this day you have the whole "we was Kangs" sort of reaction, is because, and this is going to be harsh, and that's why I gave the disclaimer at the start saying you may or may not like what I have to say, but it needs to be said. And I'm going to need you guys to really open your ears and your minds to what I'm going to say and try to actually really hear me. The problem is that when people step outside and they look at what's in their real world, they don't see anything from black people or enough from black people that in their mind justifies having these sorts of images. Okay? It's kind of like stolen valor in a sense, right? If you know the whole concept of stolen valor, like the idea that you're sort of being rewarded or boasting or being praised for something that you didn't actually do or achieve or earn. Now, the easiest way I can try and illustrate this to you guys is using East Asians, okay? If you look at the Japanese, the Chinese, I mean, they're constantly, especially the Chinese, they're constantly in the media as villains. They're constantly in the media, and I'm talking not just fictional media, but in real life, you know, They're constantly being made out to be the villains. But at the same time, there's a certain level of respect that people also give simultaneously to the Chinese when it comes to certain matters, right? If it comes to certain things such as technology or anything like that, any type of advancements, a lot of respect is going to be given. Now, if it came to something like sports, if it came to rap, I don't think, unless we could see that they were doing something that was truly as good, I don't think people are going to peg the Chinese or a Chinese person as being the best at either of those things. That would be something they'd more give to black people. See, no one gets mad when an NBA 2K game comes out and it has a black person on the cover, right? No one's going to be mad about this. It doesn't make sense, okay? No one's mad when people talk about rap and hip hop and they associate with black people. No one's mad about this. In fact, if I go back to the NBA example, no one's even mad about the fact that the NBA is predominantly black. And if they are mad about it, they've got a very small voice because that shit is making a shit ton of money. And if you look at the people who are in the stands a lot of the time, it's a lot of people who ain't black. So, again, the premise here that these people just don't want to ever see black people, like you said, outside of stereotypical depictions, right? So let's be fair, that's what you're saying. You're saying that, well, they're cool with the NBA, they're cool with these other things because it's outside of stereotypical depictions. But this is why I brought up East Asians, because the things that they are known for being good at, everyone expects that for them too. So the Japanese, for example, something that Japan does very well with their media is they understand how to appeal to the Western market. This is something that a lot of times, especially with their video games and stuff like that, they've had to deal with and they've had to struggle with because there have been games that traditionally did very well in Japan, but then didn't sell well overseas or vice versa. So this is a point of contention the Japanese specifically have actually had to deal with quite a lot, especially back in the day when they were trying to establish a lot of their franchises, right? Whereas like nowadays, they're quite well known to make video games and we know which kind of series, like Final Fantasy, right, Dragon Quest, a lot of their JRPGs really, Kingdom Hearts, a lot of these things, we kind of just know, yeah, this is part of what Japan makes and we're cool with it, right? You look at the animes, it's popular, it's become even more popular over the years. So there's a lot of things that they make that people respect because they tend to just make the stories and they appeal to the Japanese base at times and they appeal to outside of their base. And that actually gives them a wider range of reactions and a wider appeal than if, say, a lot of black people, when they want to try and make fiction or fantasy and they just want to make it the black version of Game of Thrones or just the black, and it's like they focus more on trying to do the black variant or something as opposed to just making a story. When you look at the predominant primary image of black people that exists in media, and not just in media, but also that black people themselves identify with, is it going to be more Black Panther? Or is it going to be more, the average rapper, hip hop? Let's be real about this. Okay, and this is going to tie into a point that you're going to make in a minute. But we have to be real. What is it that black people predominantly push and prioritize and identify with themselves? And then the people who are outside of black culture, they see that and they think, well, these people seem to value this type of shit. So why are they now trying to portray themselves like this? And for them, it's immersion breaking because it doesn't line up. Just being honest. That's the truth.
Specific roles doing things, or worse, being the center of something. That's what I think anyway. Here's another example. We can all agree that in The Lord of the Rings, all elves are pale-skinned and tall, right? Contrary to what recent media has tried to do, canonically, they're meant to be extremely fair-skinned in that universe. They are also known to be fairest and wisest of the earthly race of Arda. They give off an aura of nobility, sophistication, and grace. Most people accept this as part of the lore in that world. However, outside of The Lord of the Rings, elves exist in many universes and have become a mainstay of fantasy, carrying many of the aforementioned traits as well. Except now, they're not tied to the rule of The Lord of the Rings. Elves can exist in different colors, shapes, and sizes to some extent. Yet, despite it being a completely different universe, the idea of an elf being brown is unacceptable to them because, in their head, an elf has characteristics that are not compatible with dark skin, aka black people. To them, elves are white people with pointy ears. That's it. You can tell those elves aren't humans, but they don't care, and they never will. Now, onto the next section of this topic of black people in fiction, and I promise you this one will not sit well with people who are black. Now, as you've been watching this video, I am sure you've likely concluded that maybe we should create more fiction that centers black and African culture, right? Do it ourselves so we won't have to deal with it all, and you'd be on the right track. The problem is, black people don't support something unless it's either already popular or has traits they are familiar with, aka European characteristics and settings. This is the unfortunate truth here. I say this because there are hundreds of fictions out there being created where black people are the primary setting and people don't support them. This is not something new. Black people will complain about wanting diversity, yearning to be in settings of their favorite fictional genres, but when it comes time to support it, they are nowhere to be seen. They make no effort to check out new works to see if they like them. When Black Panther became a hit, the comic run didn't see an uptick in long-term sales. Black people swear up and down that they...
Well, in fairness to this, I mean, a lot of comics have been on a downtrend. So I don't know if that's really fair to put against Black Panther specifically, because a lot of people are not purchasing comic books the same way anymore, right? That's a thing with all the comics. That's not like a brand new thing. I think what's more interesting and what's a better question to ask is who created Black Panther in the first place? And who popularized Black Panther to the point where he could even be regarded as significant enough to get a movie? Because I don't know about you, but I can tell you as a black geek for my whole life that a lot of the geek stuff I was interested in as a kid, it was usually black people who would act like that shit was not interesting or it was lame or corny or whatever. Not white people. I'm just being honest. So I think, again, we have to be honest about some of these things and we have to give some of that context. Now, to do with your point that you said about black people not supporting things, this is a massive, massive thing that I'm glad you brought up and I'm glad you addressed it. And this is a good point because this is something that needs to be explored and just kind of examined a lot more. But I will say this, I do think black people will support things, but like you said, it tends to have to be popular or whatever already. Some of the books that you brought up, like if I just go back, right? Like Children of Blood and Bone, for example, right? If I was to pull this up right now, okay, on Goodreads, it's got a lot of reviews. It's got a lot of reviews. A lot of people have read this book, okay? I remember at the time when it first came out, and there was a lot of talk about the author, and she'd gotten like a big 6-figure deal. I don't know if it was a 6-figure deal or if it was even more than that. It might have been more, like, but they gave her a lot of money as an advance for this. And they was talking about it being optioned to be a movie and all this kind of stuff. Like they put a lot of hype around this brand new author. So, you know, you got Octavia E. Butler up there, and she's considered like one of the main like OGs when it comes to a lot of science fiction and fantasy. So I don't know, it's kind of interesting because you're right in the sense of a lot of black people don't support these things. But the thing is, they exist though. They exist. This book is published. These books are published. Octavia E. Butler back in the day was published. Who published these people? And who was buying these people's books? See, this is the problem with your premise, okay? In order for it to be airtight, all of these things would have had to have flopped. All of these things would have had to have been forgotten. It would have had to have been a thing. In fact, not even. They wouldn't have even been published. If white people collectively are so against black people, black media, in the way that you're claiming, none of these things that you're showing me, unless it's produced by black people independently, would exist. And even then, the systems and platforms that they're using to put these things out is coming from where? Predominantly, people who are white or non-black have built these platforms. So how would these systems, how would these things allow black people to do this if they're just straight up against black people? Why wouldn't their algorithms or whatever suppress them, stop them? You get what I'm saying? Again, you're right. There are most certainly people in this world who just hate us. They're racist. They're never going to like anything we do. They're going to call everything that we make shit, woke, DEI. They're never going to be okay with it. But those are not the people you need to worry about. What you need to be more concerned with is why even people who historically have been okay with black characters, why those people are starting to feel like they're getting, you know, fed up with it or feeling some type of way. Those are the people we need to be taking a closer look at.
Love the film, but it has never translated to comic purchases. It looks worse when you have other fiction like The Boys and Invincible becoming very popular from their TV series and seeing a massive uptick in sales for their respective series. Even in anime, when a series becomes popular, people buy the source material. And you can tell because they last 10 years, people have been mentioning the same black fictional characters in things like...
Again, manga has been having better sales as opposed to comics. A lot of people have already discussed this. That's not something I would specifically pin onto being to do with black people. So I would put it like that. You know, I just think comic books in general were just not as popular because people are using the movies now as like a substitute for a lot of that. You know what I mean?
The top 10 videos list, showing that most have not expanded their list. And when some black people check out these black created works, they either drop them or never talk about them, which leads to the next point. What kinds of stories are black writers writing? As I've mentioned before, when it comes to fictional worlds, they are the play realms for people's minds. They're an expression of what we want to do and be, an escapism from reality. So the question is, are black people writing fictional worlds as a play realm for black people? I'm focusing on black writers here because I don't expect non-black writers to write stories with this mindset, but they're more than welcome to try if they want to give it a shot. I don't think it's worth it though, because if you mess up, people will just call you.
Okay, that's good. That's good that you're acknowledging they don't need to do it. Because that's one of my biggest points of contention with black people when they get onto this whole talking point, is that they usually it's like they want to shame non-black people or white people specifically into making stories and settings featuring them, and it's just like, no, don't be begging anyone for inclusion. Don't do that. Let them decide if they want to do it. And then, like he's about to say, even when they do it, is it even worth it?
Racist, so it's better not try unless you have sufficient knowledge of black people and have experience with them. I'll be honest, I've checked out a lot of comics and sometimes manga where black people are featured and were created by black people, and a lot of times, I'm going to be honest, they never feel like worlds I want to escape to, and I think that's the biggest issue I have come across. It might be different for others, but that has always been the case for me. These worlds feel like they're just mimicking tropes without a focus or inspiration. I'll try my best to help you understand what I mean. Let's look at the simple hero trope. In most of these stories, the hero starts as a nobody from a no-name village, aspires to be more, and is suddenly destined to save the world and become a hero. This trope plays into a boy's desire to be something, to leave home, or to make a name for himself. It's very popular among people in the West who are constantly told stories about European men doing great things, and now they want to do the same. That's what I think anyway. Another example is the isekai trope in Japan. This is where a boy who is either a loner or hates his life is, due to an accident, transported to another world and given a second chance. This genre is extremely popular in Japan because many Japanese youth are suffering from isolation and loneliness, hate the mundanity of life, and gravitate toward these stories for escape. I gave these two examples because they draw from a desire in these groups. Of course, black people can easily enjoy these genres. I myself am a sucker for the isekai trope, but they're written with these aforementioned groups in mind. What I mean is that these tropes stem from lived experiences that other people in that group can relate to, and they're written well enough that people outside those groups relate to specific themes too, but they're never the target audience. Even vengeful story tropes are popular, but they're always written from that race's experience and outlook and how they would approach it. I hope I am making sense here to you all. There are plenty of stories featuring black people. The question is, why aren't they popular amongst black people? What is it about these stories written by black people that never seem to captivate black people and make them stay and make it popular? And trust me, when black people like something, they express it so much that it becomes popular outside their community. So I no longer think the problem is a lack of diversity, but rather the quality of that diversity. And I believe that some black people are uncomfortable telling unapologetically African black experiences in fear of upsetting white people. Or they tell a safe, passive story to avoid alienating a specific group, meaning some black people try to write stories to cater to another group, a group with more disposable income and a history of actually buying something they like. That was just a little rant, but the core of the conversation is black people in fiction and how we're perceived. So let's look at the final example I have. I came across this book called Red.
So before it gets to this point, it's funny, it's got Red Rising up here. I will say this to do with that. So you're talking about the quality of the diversity, and I would say that is the biggest issue. Okay, the actual diversity itself is not the problem anymore. That may have been the problem in previous decades, but I think where we are in the 2026 world, diversity is most certainly not the issue. The issue is where it's being used and how it's being used. And what a lot of the critics will often say is it's being forced, it's being shoved down our throats. That's their favorite phrase to use. And I unfortunately have to agree that there is a lot of that. There is a lot of credence to that talking point. Okay. There is a lot of instances that I personally see as a black person, I'm like, you're forcing it. And the race swapping is one of the biggest examples of this, because there is almost no reason to ever do it. Because like we all know, if it was done in reverse, black people are crashing out, as they rightfully should. So the race swapping thing, that by itself needs to stop. And I'm going to tell you right now, that is one of the reasons why a lot of people do have contention with black characters, even when they are original. Because, you know, you guys have all heard a lot of people talking about black fatigue and this kind of stuff, which to me was inevitable. And the reason why it was inevitable is because people are sick and tired of the double standards, and they're sick and tired of the nonsense. Now, again, I understand why black people feel like they're justified in this because of things historically, but you can't use that against people who today weren't guilty of any of those things, right? And when I talk to the average black person, it's like they still think that they're living in Jim Crow. Like they still think they're living in some time where people were explicitly being oppressed by the system. They still think this. They still think this. Okay, and it's kind of hard. Like for me as a black person, I see it and I get sick and tired of it, and I get exhausted and fatigued by it. So if I feel that way and I'm black and I actually have an actual reason to care about you guys because I'm part of the same racial grouping as you, and I have family and friends and whoever who are black, so I have a reason to care. Most of these people don't have that. And even though they don't have that, they still would support these things. Black Panther did not make over $1 billion purely off the backs of black people. It didn't, guys. Okay? Those other stories, like I said already, they didn't become published and make the money that they did make purely off of black people. It was white publishers and white people who decided that they wanted to give Tomi, the author of Children of Blood and Bone, a big advance. White people decided that. At the very least, non-black people. So, again, like, we have to kind of look at these things, because I think a big part of the issue is that there is some resentment that has been built up. And I don't think a lot of white people want to be brutally honest. I think the whole black fatigue thing is the first time where they've really come out en masse and try to actually express their annoyance with black people. And you have to understand, when you look at things like the race swapping with Ariel, I'm telling you right now, the average black person I spoke to thought it was a good thing. I got into so many arguments with black people where they were trying to argue with me and tell me that, you know, it is good, it's empowering, this, that, and the third. Now, if I was a white person, if I was a white woman, I would feel pissed. You know what I mean? Like, I would feel pissed. But what's crazy, and again, against your point, is there were even non-black people who argued with me. And that's happened with me on numerous topics. There's so many topics that I've brought up where I'm trying to argue and say, you know, I don't think black people should be trying to race swap. I don't think they should be trying to do this. I don't think that they're victims. And I've had Asian people, white people, male, female, argue with me and tell me I'm wrong. Now, me personally, I see this as on some white savior type of shit, but they honestly think that they somehow have the qualifications to tell me as a black person that I'm wrong to critique black people. Now, that to me is crazy. You know, but that's the thing. Videos like this usually don't take into account that type of context or any of those other kinds of discussions, right? So anyway, let's hear what he's got to say about Red Rising.
Which is about a gritty sci-fi series about Darrow, a red from the lowest caste in a color-coded society on Mars, who discovers his people are enslaved while the ruling Golds live in luxury on the terraformed surface. Driven by vengeance and loss, he undergoes a painful transformation to infiltrate the Golds' elite school, fighting for justice in a brutal, Roman-inspired world of political intrigue, war games, and rebellion against oppression. People love this book, and I kept thinking, if they had made the main character black and kept everything else the same, would people be as invested? And I mean keep all the characters the same, but make the main character Darrow black. Do you see how the tone and vibe change? Because I can assure you, a lot of black people would fuck with this story heavily, but others would not. A story like Darrow would make some white people uncomfortable, or they'd call it DEI slop to discredit it. People are fine with heroes fighting their oppressor violently.
Well, they wouldn't have called it DEI slop because at the time when Red Rising came out, that wasn't a thing. In fact, that story with a black character would have a much better chance of doing well back then. And a large part of the audience for Red Rising is a lot of white women, like younger white women, older white women, because it's a YA book, and YA, I should know because my book is YA. A lot of YA is predominantly female audience. So I don't think they would have cared, especially considering the fact that in YA fiction, and really just in a lot of fiction in general, but particularly fantasy and sci-fi, a lot of the books, as I said already, like a lot of the audiences for that were pushing for these diverse books, and they were the ones reading it. So you're saying a lot of black people would fuck with it heavily. Sure, when it's a movie, when it's a Netflix series, yeah, maybe then, yeah, black people are going to pull up and watch it. Okay? But as a book, no. No, they're not. They're not. Even if you put him on the cover, right? Like, they're still not going to read it. That's just the truth. A lot of black people don't want to sit down and read a book, bro. And you're not going to... Listen, you're going to have a hard time arguing with someone who's literally a black author about this. You're going to have a very hard time arguing with me on that. I'm telling you this for an absolute fact. Again, are there black people who read books and who write books? Yeah, duh. But like you're also saying here, do they support us a lot of the time? No, the fuck they don't. And you'll find as a black person that if you are going to make anything in the speculative genres, unless it's something that's visual, like this image you've got up here, okay, this image you got, if you was to take this image, right, if it was a graphic novel, okay, there's a better chance. And I think Red Rising has got graphic novels, if I'm not mistaken. So the graphic novel variant might have done better amongst actual black readers. But this, a novel in prose, no. And you guys can be mad if you want, but that's, again, I'm not unqualified to have this opinion. I know what I'm talking about. Okay? You can go right now on Goodreads, and you can go and find the books that he showed you and you can look in the review section. A lot of people had their profile picture up. Go and look and see how many of those people are black faces. I'm so confident in this that I don't even have to look up all of those books, and I know I'm going to be correct. I know what I'm talking about.
Not black. And if they are black, now they are subject to rules artificially made for how they should fight their oppression. That's just one example. I think I've rambled enough, and I think you get what I am trying to say. There are no true stories that center on the desires of black people's fantasies, and do it unapologetically, and with sophistication. And of course, people are not comfortable with black people straying away from their designated and stereotypical roles in fiction by other people, because they have a perception of us that they refuse to let go. I feel like black people will always have their place in other people's fiction questioned. That's just going to keep happening, and it's why it's essential to understand at least why it happens. Whether we create our own fiction, or someone adds us in their fiction, that is always going to be a thing. I do believe that we, as a race, need to do better at supporting good work by other black people. That's the bare minimum we can do to combat the perception of us. Anyway, that's all I wanted to talk about. Let me know what you guys are thinking, and I'll catch you guys next time.
I agree with that final point. Black people definitely need to support those things a lot more, especially if you're going to make videos like this. Because to me, it's a moot point, and I feel like it's going to be immediately invalidated by the fact that black people themselves won't support it. And that point you made at the end there, when you were talking about stereotypical roles, I don't know anybody who has a bigger issue with black people not acting stereotypical than black people themselves. Like, I can tell you from my lived experience, the vast majority of the time growing up, the main people who took issue with me being a certain way or having certain interests was black people. We all know this because I'm going to just say one thing that every black person immediately will identify with. Acting white. See, the very fact that there are black people in this world that will say that certain things is you acting white, that to me invalidates a lot of the upset you can have with this. Or at the very least, it makes it a lot harder to take it seriously, because it's like, yeah, but the main people who have supported my interest in the things that I'm into historically have not looked like me. Now, let's be very clear about this. In recent years, if I talk to a black person about anything that I'm interested in, I don't get a lot of these types of comments, okay? But I'm an adult now, and a lot of us are grown up now, and in the last decade or so, a lot of geek culture and geek media has come into the mainstream, and now a lot of people think it's super cool. But a lot of us will know that back in the day, amongst black people, that was not the case. I know for damn sure as a Star Wars fan, it wasn't. Okay? A lot of black people that I knew growing up didn't care about Star Wars and didn't think it was cool. And even still now, a lot of them don't. Yeah, they might play a video game here and there. Yeah, they might say that, you know, they fuck with Finn. Yeah, they might say those kinds of things today. But even their interest in a lot of those things is still surface level and superficial. How many of them really know the lore and will go deep? How many of them, if I talk about Jason and Jaina Solo, know who I'm talking about? If I told them to spell Jason, they're gonna put an S in it, right? How many of these people know these things? Black people want to have a certain degree of influence and inclusion in things that they historically have not supported. If I'm a white person and I go to all of these fantasy conventions, okay, I don't see a whole bunch of black people there. So why am I going to think that they belong in those spaces? Because when the money is there, when we're putting money behind movements, if I, as a white person, if I set up something, if I put a stand in Comic-Con, how many black people are coming to support it? Do you see what I'm trying to say? And again, you already said yourself, this even goes for you as a black creator. So it makes it difficult for you to come with this entire argument and to hold it and to be completely solid when you have these types of things to consider. I can imagine people being mad as fuck at my take here. I can imagine people, you know, not fucking with it, feeling some type of way. And that's fair enough. That's fair enough. But, you know, as I said, I'll say it again. You may or may not like what I have to say, but it needed to be said. It needed to be said. At the end of the day, like I say, for me, being someone who writes fantasy, who's been into fantasy and sci-fi my whole life, who's a black geek, a blood, whatever you want to call it, I understand parts of where this video is coming from. But there is a lot of stuff that black people need to think about before they can, you know, get fully in their feelings. And I read the comment section, and a lot of people are like, it's just racism, it's just racism. Again, I will leave you with this question. If it's purely racism, and if non-black people, particularly white people, but maybe Asians as well, if they never want to see a black character in any type of role outside of the stereotypes, as you say, then explain the black characters that have been popular and didn't have this. Explain the black characters that have been popular. Again, I'm not going to deny the fact that there's definitely a limitation that is put onto black characters in terms of how they're perceived or what kinds of archetypes they embody. I definitely think there are definitely limitations that exist with a lot of those black characters. But you have to ask yourself, do black people also play into this? And if they do, then how can you really get mad about non-black people doing something that you yourself do? It makes more sense for them to do it. And the worst part is, as I've already said, they actually do it less. A lot of the black characters that you know of, that you want to go and cosplay, didn't come from black people. And the only reason those characters have been part of stories and products that were successful is because non-black people financially supported it. This is the truth, guys. This isn't my opinion. This isn't speculation. It's not a theory. That is historical fact. So you guys can be upset. You can even hit the dislike on this video. You can be mad. But that is the reality of it. And if you want to shift things in any type of regard, you have to address that first. Also, to the uploader of this video, I don't know why you have to use an AI voice. Okay? I don't know what that's all about. I think it's probably because you're from Africa and you don't want to use your own accent, but that's ironic in and of itself. Alright? I mean, I'm British and I'm black. I mean, you could have just hired someone like me to do it. Give me some money, I'll do it. No. I'm joking. But look, I'm just saying, you know, I'm not sure about having an AI voice. I feel like that kind of detracts from, you know, what you're trying to go for a little bit. I'm not saying you have to come up and you can be a faceless YouTuber if you want. I think your points would hit a lot harder if you wasn't. But it's up to you. It's your channel. You can do as you will. I just think AI, maybe, you know, it wouldn't necessarily be the move. I can see the runtime for this almost an hour. It's going to be a pain in the ass editing this, but I'm going to have to try and put this together. It'll be a long video regardless, but I think it's a reaction video. Like I said, it was going to be a proper reaction. I did a proper reaction. It's a topic I'm very passionate about. I have a lot of, you know, history discussing these topics, and whilst this specific channel I have had no subscribers, I don't get any views on this channel yet. I wanted to react to this, you know, because at the end of the day, it's something that I'm very, very much passionate about, like I say. I will say this. If you guys are interested in seeing someone who's black, who's a creative, and this and the third, you can check out my channel. You can subscribe, because I'm not going to lie, I don't like having 10 subscribers, okay? I'm not used to having a YouTube channel with just 10 subscribers anymore. You know, on my main channel, I have a few thousand subscribers, so I feel a bit weird just sitting at 10, all right? It's a bit odd. But it is what it is. I would implore you guys to stick around. I will be releasing a lot more content throughout the year. Probably some other reaction videos whenever it's relevant. I'm not a reaction channel per se. I'm much more interested in trying to push out videos to do with writing, storytelling, and stuff like that. But I most certainly am going to be putting out videos discussing, criticizing different topics in relation to media, representation, all that kind of stuff. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to review and react to this video. So if you're interested in any of that from the perspective of someone who doesn't just talk and yap on YouTube like 99% of these people do, but who actually is a creative, myself, who actually is trying to create some stuff in media, then please feel free to hit the subscribe and hear what I've got to say, even if you disagree. But anyway, that's all I've got to say, and I'm out. Peace.